I never thought my last performance would end like this. The sunlight was streaming through the stained glass windows of St. Michael's Cathedral, casting rainbow shadows across the ancient wooden pews. Our choir stood proudly in our white robes, 40 children's voices rising in perfect harmony. I could see Mom in the front row, her eyes glistening with tears of pride as I stepped forward for my solo. The first notes of Amazing Grace flowed from my lips, pure and clear in the hushed church. This was my moment, the one I'd practiced for endless hours, despite my weak heart, despite the doctor's warnings, despite everything. My voice soared to the vaulted ceiling, carrying all my hopes and dreams with it. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. That's when I felt it. A sharp, crushing pain in my chest, like someone had wrapped an iron band around my heart and was squeezing. I tried to keep singing, to hold on to the notes that had always been my refuge, but the pain was too intense. The world began to spin, the rainbow lights dancing crazily before my eyes. Sarah, Mom's scream cut through the sudden silence as my voice faltered. I saw her running towards me, her face twisted in terror. Mrs. Anderson, our choir director, reached for me as I swayed. The other children's faces blurred into a sea of shock and fear. Please, God, I heard Mom praying as I collapsed into her arms. Not my baby, please, not my baby. The cold stone floor pressed against my cheek as darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. Through the growing shadows, I could see Emily, my greatest tormentor, my unknown half-sister, staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Was it fear? Regret? I couldn't tell anymore. The last thing I remember was Father Michael kneeling beside me, his worn Bible pressed to my forehead as he administered last rites, his voice urgent but steady. Through this holy anointing, may the Lord in His love and mercy. The cathedral's bells began to toll noon as my world faded to black. But this wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning of a journey that would change not just my life, but the lives of everyone around me. A journey that would teach me the true meaning of love, forgiveness, and faith. As consciousness slipped away, I heard Mom's desperate whisper, "Hold on, Sarah. Please hold on. There's so much you don't know yet." She was right. There was so much I didn't know about my family, about Emily, about the power of forgiveness. But I was about to learn it all in a way none of us could have imagined. The darkness took me completely then, but somewhere in the distance I could still hear the choir singing, "I once was lost, but now am found." They had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. This dramatic opening sets the stage for the deeper story to come, introducing key elements: the choir, Mom, Emily, Father Michael, while creating immediate tension and emotional investment. It avoids any sci-fi elements, focusing instead on the human and spiritual aspects that will drive the narrative forward. Would you like me to continue with the next section? If this story touches your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories of faith, love, and the power of the human spirit with others in need. The 8 years of my life before that fateful day in St. Michael's Cathedral were marked by the steady rhythm of hospital visits and my mother's unwavering devotion. I was born with a congenital heart condition that the doctors said would eventually claim my life. But Grace Thompson, my mother, refused to accept that verdict. She worked 3 jobs as a morning waitress, afternoon receptionist, and evening caregiver just to afford my medical bills and the experimental treatments that kept me alive. Our small apartment above Miller's Pharmacy became our sanctuary. Every evening, Mom would return exhausted but still managed to smile as she helped me with homework or sang hymns while preparing our modest dinner. The walls were adorned with my drawings of angels and the Virgin Mary, alongside the countless get well cards I'd received over the years. A worn wooden crucifix, passed down from my grandmother, hung above my bed, a constant reminder of the faith that sustained us. Mom never spoke about my father, and I learned early not to ask. The only photo I had of him was creased and fading, tucked away in my mother's Bible. Sometimes late at night I'd hear her praying, begging God for strength and guidance. Lord, help me protect her from the truth she'd whisper, thinking I was asleep. I didn't understand then what truth she meant. Despite my condition, Mom insisted on giving me as normal a life as possible. She enrolled me in St. Michael's School, attached to our cathedral, where Sister Margaret made special accommodations for my frequent absences. The choir became my haven, the one place where my weakness became strength, where my voice could soar free of the constraints that bound my body. Our faith was the cornerstone of our lives. Every Sunday, without fail, we attended Mass, where Father Michael would always make time to talk with me about my latest hospital visit or choir performance. He became the father figure I never had, his gentle wisdom helping me understand the deeper meaning of suffering. Sometimes, Sarah, he'd say, God allows pain not to punish us, but to prepare us for a greater purpose. The medical bills kept mounting, but Mom never complained. She'd skip meals, wear threadbare clothes, and work extra shifts, all while maintaining her gentle smile. I'd catch her sometimes, standing in front of our kitchen window, clutching her rosary and staring at the cathedral spire visible in the distance. In those moments, she looked both stronger than steel and more fragile than glass. Our small faith community helped where they could. Mrs. Peterson from the bakery would accidentally pack extra pastries in our Sunday order. Mr. Rodriguez, the pharmacist downstairs, often found discount coupons for my medications. These small kindnesses kept us going, even in our darkest moments. I learned to read my mother's face like a weather map. The tight smile when another bill arrived. The forced cheerfulness when test results weren't what we'd hoped for. The genuine joy when I managed to attend a full week of school without incident. But most of all, I recognized the look of fierce determination that came over her whenever another doctor suggested we prepare for the inevitable. Nothing is inevitable except God's love, she would say, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. She taught me that faith wasn't just about believing in miracles, it was about finding the strength to keep going when miracles seemed impossible. Every night before bed, we'd kneel together by my window, looking out at the cathedral spire silhouetted against the sky. Mom would lead us in prayer, her voice never wavering, "Thank you, Lord, for another day with my angel. Please give us strength for tomorrow." Those moments with her arms around me and our voices joined in prayer were when I felt closest to heaven, even before my near-death experience changed everything. Looking back now, I realize that my illness, though challenging, created a bond between my mother and me that was rare and precious. We weren't just mother and daughter, we were warriors in a daily battle, armed with nothing but love, faith, and each other. What we didn't know then was that our greatest test wasn't my failing heart, it was the secrets and lies that were about to unravel, threatening to tear apart not just our family but our entire community of faith. St. Michael's School was both my sanctuary and my battlefield. While the chapel offered solace and the music room became my refuge, the hallways and playground were territories I navigated with careful vigilance. Emily Parker, with her perfect blonde hair and designer uniforms, made sure I never forgot how different I was from the other children. I still remember my first day back after a 3-week hospital stay in 6th grade. Emily stood at the center of her usual group of followers, her voice carrying across the playground, "Look who's back from the dead." Again, the word stung, but it was the gleam in her eyes that hurt most, a mixture of contempt and something else I couldn't quite identify. Now I know it was recognition, a genetic echo of the father we unknowingly shared. The bullying was subtle but relentless. A knocked-over water bottle during lunch, whispers that fell silent when I approached, anonymous notes in my locker suggesting I was too sick to be in regular classes. Emily seemed to take particular pleasure in excluding me from birthday parties and study groups, orchestrating my social isolation with surgical precision. Mrs. Anderson, our music teacher, became my strongest ally at school. She recognized something in my voice that transcended my physical limitations. During choir practice, she would position me front and center, much to Emily's visible displeasure. Music, Mrs. Anderson would say, is God's way of reminding us that beauty can emerge from broken places. Those words became my mantra during the hardest days. The choir room became my lunchtime sanctuary. While other students filled the cafeteria with laughter and gossip, I would sit at the old piano, picking out hymn melodies with one finger while eating Mom's carefully packed lunches. Sometimes Mrs. Anderson would join me, teaching me simple chord progressions or sharing stories about her own childhood struggles with illness. Emily's campaign of isolation might have succeeded completely if not for Katie Martinez, a quiet girl who shared my love of music. She would sometimes join me in the choir room, her brown eyes full of kindness as she shared her homemade tamales and listened to my clumsy attempts at piano playing. "You're braver than any of them," she once whispered after a particularly brutal day of Emily's torments. The teachers, well-meaning but overwhelmed, often missed the subtle dynamics at play. They saw my frequent absences and physical limitations as the primary challenges, not realizing that the emotional warfare was far more damaging. Sister Margaret, my homeroom teacher, would occasionally intervene when the bullying became too obvious, but her reprimands seemed to only fuel Emily's determination. Physical education classes were particularly challenging. Even when I felt strong enough to participate, Emily and her friends would deliberately target me during games, sending balls flying at my chest or accidentally pushing me during relay races. The school nurse's office became a familiar retreat, though I often wondered if the tightness in my chest was from my heart condition or from holding back tears. Father Michael noticed my struggles, often finding me in the chapel during lunch breaks when the choir room felt too exposed. He never pressed me to explain, simply sitting quietly beside me as I tried to find solace in prayer. Sometimes he would say, "The greatest acts of faith are the small ones, getting up each morning, facing our fears, choosing kindness when others show cruelty." What none of us knew then was that Emily's cruelty masked a deeper pain. Her perfect life was as carefully constructed as her immaculate appearance, built on the same foundations of secrets and lies that would soon shake our entire community. The father who lavished her with expensive gifts and attention was the same man who had abandoned my mother and me before I was born. Despite everything, I found moments of joy at St. Michael's. The way sunlight filtered through the chapel's stained glass during morning prayer. The sound of 40 young voices raised in harmony during choir practice. The quiet satisfaction of acing a test despite missing weeks of classes. These small victories kept me going, even when my heart felt heavier with emotional pain than physical weakness. Looking back, I realized that every taunt, every exclusion, every moment of loneliness was preparing me for the extraordinary journey ahead. God was teaching me about forgiveness long before I understood its true power. As Mom always said, sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. None of us could have imagined just how true those words would prove to be. The truth shattered my world on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I had been released early from choir practice due to fatigue, my heart acting up again after a particularly challenging rehearsal. Instead of heading straight home, I stopped at the cathedral to pray, a habit Mom had instilled in me since I was old enough to kneel. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the stained glass windows as I slipped into my usual pew near the confessional. That's when I heard them voices drifting from Father Michael's office. I recognized Mom's voice immediately, tight with emotion in a way I'd never heard before. "He's back in town, Father. James Parker is back, and he's asking about Sarah." My heart skipped a beat at the unfamiliar name, but something in Mom's voice made me stay still, barely breathing. Emily's father. Father Michael's response was gentle but concerned. "Grace, perhaps it's time." "Time for what?" "Time to tell my daughter that her father didn't just abandon us, he left us for another woman. That he has another family, a healthy daughter he chose over his sick one." Mom's voice broke. "That the girl who torments her at school is her own half-sister." The world tilted sideways. Emily Parker, my tormentor, my bully, the girl who seemed to hate me for simply existing, was my sister. The same Emily whose father picked her up in expensive cars, who wore designer clothes, who had everything I didn't. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. "Grace, secrets have a way of coming to light," Father Michael said softly. "James has rights as her father." Rights? Mom's laugh was bitter. Where were his rights when Sarah was in the hospital for months as a baby? Where were his rights when I was working 3 jobs to pay for her medications? He gave up his rights when he looked at our newborn daughter, saw her heart condition, and decided he wanted a fresh start with someone else. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the irregular beat of my damaged heart. All these years I had imagined my father as someone who might have died, or who might have had a good reason for leaving. The truth was so much worse. He had looked at me, a sick baby, and chosen to start over with a new family. Had he known about Emily's bullying? Did he care? "He's threatened to tell her himself," Mom continued, her voice dropping. "Says he feels guilty, wants to make amends. But how can I let him near her now? After everything she broke off," and I could hear the tears in her voice. "Emily is every bit her father's daughter, privileged, cruel, looking down on those she thinks are beneath her. How can I tell Sarah that the girl who makes her life miserable is her own blood?" The conversation continued, but I couldn't hear it over the roaring in my ears. Memories flooded back Emily's sneering face, her calculated cruelty, the way she sometimes stared at me with an intensity I couldn't understand. Had she known? Was that why she hated me so much? I must have made a sound, because suddenly the office door opened. Father Michael stood there, his kind face dropping in shock when he saw me. Behind him, Mom's face went pale. "Sarah, baby, how long have you?" I ran. Despite my weak heart, despite the doctor's warnings about overexertion, I ran from the cathedral as fast as my legs would carry me. The afternoon sun was blinding, the street swimming before my tears. I heard Mom calling after me, but I couldn't stop. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my identity, it was all built on lies. I ran until my chest felt like it would explode, until the familiar pain gripped my heart like an iron fist. Collapsing onto a bench in the park where I sometimes watched other kids play with their fathers, I finally let the sobs come. The truth was a poison in my veins, burning through every memory, every unanswered question, every lonely night. In that moment, staring at the playground where Emily and I might have played together in another life, I felt something inside me change. The pain of betrayal mixed with a strange new emotion, a desperate, aching desire to understand. Not just my father's choices or Emily's cruelty, but the bigger picture that God must see when He looks down at our broken, tangled family. The next morning, I forced myself to go to school despite Mom's tearful protests. The truth sat heavy in my chest alongside my failing heart. Everything looked different now, the school hallways, the faces of my classmates, and especially Emily. She stood by her locker, surrounded by her usual crowd, laughing about something on her phone. My sister. The word felt foreign, impossible. Maybe it was exhaustion from yesterday's run, or maybe it was the weight of secrets finally breaking me, but something made me stop in the middle of the hallway and stare at her. She noticed, her perfect features twisting into their usual sneer. "Take a picture, heart girl. It'll last longer." Something snapped inside me. Years of held-back words burst forth like a broken dam. "Do you know," I demanded, my voice carrying down the suddenly quiet hallway. "Did you know this whole time, Emily Parker? Or should I say, sister?" The color drained from her face. Behind her, whispers erupted like wildfire. Her friends looked between us, confusion and shock written across their faces. Emily's mask of superiority cracked just for a moment, revealing something that looked almost like fear. "You're crazy," she whispered, but her voice shook. "What are you talking about?" "Your father, James Parker," the name felt like acid on my tongue. "Did you know he was my father too? Did you know when you were pushing me downstairs? Or leaving those notes in my locker? Or telling everyone not to be friends with me that you were torturing your own sister?" The hallway had gone completely silent. Even the teachers who had emerged from their classrooms stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. Emily's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, denial, anger, and something else, something that looked almost like guilt. "You're lying," she said, but her voice was small, uncertain. "My father would never." Never. What? My voice rose, hysteria creeping in. Never abandon his sick baby for a chance at a perfect family? Never pretend I didn't exist while lavishing you with everything I could never have? Or never tell you about your sick half-sister who goes to your school? The pain in my chest was building, a familiar pressure that I ignored. Spots danced at the edges of my vision, but I couldn't stop. Years of hurt and loneliness poured out of me. "Do you know what it's like?" I asked, my voice breaking. "To watch your mother work herself to exhaustion just to keep you alive. To spend every other month in hospitals while your father is out there, healthy and wealthy, pretending you don't exist? To be bullied by your own sister who has everything you ever wanted." Emily took a step toward me, her hand half raised, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "Sarah, I didn't. I never knew." The pain suddenly intensified, stealing my breath. My knees buckled as the familiar darkness started creeping in. I heard gasps and screams as I collapsed, but surprisingly it was Emily who reached me first. "Someone get help," she screamed, her voice panicked. "Please, she needs help." As consciousness faded, I felt her holding me, her tears falling on my face. "I'm sorry," she was whispering. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. Please don't die. Please, sister." The last thing I saw before darkness took me was Mrs. Anderson pushing through the crowd, her face white with fear. Behind her, Katie was already on the phone with 911. Somewhere in the distance I could hear the cathedral bells beginning to toll. The irony wasn't lost on me. It had taken a complete breakdown and another heart attack to finally break through Emily's walls. As I drifted into unconsciousness, I remembered Father Michael's words about God's mysterious ways. Perhaps this was his plan all along, to bring two broken halves of a family together in the most dramatic way possible. But as the darkness closed in, I couldn't help wondering, would I live long enough to see if this moment of connection could heal our fractured family? Or would this be my final act exposing a truth that would haunt them all forever? They say when you're dying, your life flashes before your eyes. But what I experienced was something far more profound. As my body lay in the school hallway, my consciousness drifted into a realm of pure love and understanding that no earthly words can fully capture. At first there was darkness, not frightening, but warm and encompassing, like being wrapped in my mother's embrace. Then came the light, not harsh or blinding, but gentle and welcoming. I felt myself floating away from the chaos below. Emily's tears, Mrs. Anderson's prayers, the paramedics' urgent voices, all fading into a distant echo. From this new vantage point, I could see everything with perfect clarity. My body looked small and fragile on the cold floor, surrounded by a crowd of frightened faces. Mom had arrived, her face twisted in anguish as she pushed through the gathering of students. Emily still cradled my head in her lap, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. They seemed frozen in a tableau of grief and regret. But then something extraordinary happened. A presence enveloped me, filled with such overwhelming love that it brought tears to my soul. I knew with a certainty beyond understanding that I was in the presence of divine love. It wasn't the stern, judgmental God I'd sometimes imagined, but a force of pure compassion and acceptance. In this presence, all the pain and confusion of my earthly life fell away. I understood why Emily had acted as she did, her own deep wounds, her fears, her desperate need to prove herself worthy of a father's love that was as conditional as mine was absent. I saw how my mother's protective lies had been wrapped in love, how every sacrifice she made was a prayer for my survival. The presence communicated with me, not in words but in pure understanding. It showed me that every moment of suffering had served a purpose, preparing me for a greater mission of love and reconciliation. My weak heart, which had seemed like a curse, was actually a gift that would help heal the hearts of others. Child, the presence seemed to say, you have learned more about love through your pain than many learn in a lifetime of ease. Your father's absence taught you the value of presence. Emily's cruelty taught you the power of forgiveness. Your mother's sacrifices taught you the depth of unconditional love. In that moment, I was shown visions of what could be Emily and me as true sisters, our broken family healing through forgiveness, our story touching others who struggled with their own wounds. But I was also shown the cost of this mission, the physical pain I would continue to endure, the emotional challenges ahead, the difficult path of reconciliation. The presence gave me a choice. I could stay in this realm of perfect peace and understanding, or I could return to complete the work that had already begun. The choice was mine, with no judgment either way. As I contemplated my decision, I became aware of other presences, gentle, loving beings that I somehow knew were angels. They surrounded me with encouragement and strength, showing me how my story could become a testament to the transformative power of divine love. I saw my mother's countless prayers rising like incense, Emily's hidden tears when no one was watching, Father Michael's steadfast faith in God's plan for our healing. I saw how my death would shatter them all in different ways, leaving wounds that might never heal. The decision became clear. Though this realm was paradise beyond imagination, my work wasn't finished. There were still hearts to heal, bridges to build, and love to share. The presence filled me with understanding this glimpse of heaven wasn't an ending, but a beginning. It was preparation for the mission ahead. As I made my choice to return, the presence enfolded me one last time in pure love. Remember, it seemed to say, you carry this love within you always. Share it freely, forgive completely, love unconditionally. Your strength lies not in your physical heart, but in your capacity to love despite all pain. The light began to fade, and I felt myself being drawn back toward my body. The pain was waiting, but now I understood its purpose. I carried with me a peace that transcended understanding and a mission that would change not just my life, but the lives of everyone around me. Returning to my body felt like diving into ice water after basking in warm sunlight. The first sensation was pain-sharp, intense, and overwhelming. Then came the sounds, the steady beep of heart monitors, the hiss of oxygen, and my mother's voice, raw from hours of prayer, reciting the rosary by my bedside. I couldn't open my eyes at first, but I could feel Emily's presence too. She was there, quiet and watchful, her usual confidence replaced by something more vulnerable. Through my half-conscious state, I heard snippets of conversation, doctors discussing my miraculous recovery, nurses whispering about how long I had been gone, and Father Michael's steady voice offering comfort to both my mother and Emily. When I finally managed to open my eyes, the hospital room came into focus slowly. Mom was asleep in a chair beside my bed, her hand clutching mine, her rosary wrapped around our joined fingers. Emily sat in the corner, her designer clothes wrinkled from hours of waiting, her face stripped of makeup and pretense. The morning sun painted everything in shades of gold, reminding me of the divine light I had experienced. Sarah, Emily's whisper, was hesitant, unlike anything I'd heard from her before. "Are you really awake?" She moved closer, careful not to wake Mom. The girl who had tormented me for years now looked lost, like a child seeking forgiveness but not knowing how to ask for it. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. Emily quickly brought me water, her hand shaking as she held the cup to my lips. Such a simple act of kindness, yet it meant everything in that moment. As I sipped, our eyes met, and I saw in hers the same pain and longing for connection that I had always felt. I saw everything I managed to whisper. I understand now the words were inadequate to express the profound insights I had gained during my near-death experience, but Emily's eyes widened with understanding. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking, "about you being my sister, about Dad, about any of it. I was just so angry all the time, and you were everything I wasn't. Genuine, talented, loved for who you were, not what you could achieve." The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. All those years I had envied her perfect life, while she had envied what she saw as my authentic existence. We had been mirrors reflecting each other's deepest insecurities, neither seeing the full picture. Mom stirred then, her eyes flying open at the sound of our voices. The joy on her face at seeing me awake quickly turned to concern as she realized Emily and I were talking. But before she could intervene, I squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Mom," I said softly. "I know everything now, and I understand why you tried to protect me. But secrets don't protect us, they just keep us from healing." The next few hours were a blur of doctors, tests, and tearful conversations. My medical recovery was inexplicable by scientific standards, but I knew better. I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at healing our broken family. Explaining my near-death experience proved challenging. How could I describe colors that don't exist on Earth, or love that transcends human understanding? How could I convey the profound peace I had felt, or the mission I had been given? Most people listened politely but skeptically, seeing only a medical miracle rather than a spiritual transformation. But Emily understood somehow. Perhaps it was the shared blood running through our veins, or maybe it was because she had held me as I died and returned. Whatever the reason, she became my most attentive listener, soaking in every detail of my experience with an intensity that reminded me we were indeed sisters. "I want to help," she declared one evening, after the doctors had left and Mom had gone to the chapel to pray. "Whatever this mission of yours is, whatever you saw over there, I want to be part of it. I need to make things right." Looking at her then, I saw not the bully who had tormented me, but the sister I was meant to have. We were two halves of a broken whole, brought together by divine intervention for a purpose greater than ourselves. "We'll do it together," I told her, reaching for her hand. "That's what sisters are for." The weeks following my return from death's threshold were filled with profound changes, both within our family and throughout the St. Michael's community. News of my experience spread quickly, transforming the school hallways from spaces of torment into corridors of whispered wonder. The same students who had once avoided me now approached with tentative questions about heaven, angels, and God's love. My relationship with Emily evolved in ways that surprised everyone, ourselves included. She became my fierce protector, using her social influence to shield me from curious onlookers and overzealous well-wishers. During lunch breaks, she would sit with me in the choir room. Our previous roles of bully and victim dissolved into something far more complex and meaningful. "Tell me again about the light," she would ask, her voice soft and childlike, so different from her former swagger. Did you really feel no anger there? No pain? Her questions revealed the depths of her own spiritual hunger, a longing for forgiveness that matched my own need to forgive. But the most challenging aspect of our new reality was facing our father. James Parker arrived at the hospital 3 days after my recovery, his expensive suit and carefully crafted apology striking a discordant note in our lives. Emily tensed visibly when he entered the room, her hand finding mine in a gesture of solidarity that would have seemed impossible just weeks before. "Sarah," he began, his voice catching slightly. "I've made terrible mistakes. I thought I was protecting everyone by staying away, but I was only protecting myself." His eyes darted between Emily and me, seeing perhaps for the first time how his choices had wounded both his daughters. Mom stood in the corner, her face a mask of carefully controlled emotion. I could see the years of struggle etched in the lines around her eyes, the countless nights of working multiple jobs while he lived in luxury. Yet when she spoke, her voice held no bitterness. "James, the girls need to hear the whole truth. All of it." The story unfolded like a dark fairy tale. How he'd panicked when learning of my heart condition, how fear of losing a child had driven him to abandon us, how guilt had led him to overcompensate with Emily, creating a pressure cooker of expectations that had warped her childhood. Each revelation was a shard of truth that cut deep but somehow began the process of healing. Emily's reaction surprised us all. "You made me hate her," she said quietly, her grip on my hand tightening. "Every time I achieved something, you'd say how lucky I was to be healthy, how I had to be perfect because I had opportunities others didn't. I always thought you were talking about random sick kids, but you were talking about my sister. You turned her into a shadow that I could never escape." The impact of her words hung heavy in the hospital room. Father Michael, who had been silently observing from the doorway, stepped forward then. Perhaps he suggested gently, "This is the moment to share what you learned on the other side, Sarah." Taking a deep breath, I described the divine love I had experienced, the understanding that every pain and betrayal had served a greater purpose. "In that light," I explained, "I saw how we're all connected, all part of God's plan. Our broken family isn't a mistake, it's an opportunity to demonstrate the power of forgiveness." My father wept then, real tears that carved channels through his perfect facade. Emily moved to comfort him instinctively, then stopped, caught between old loyalties and new truths. The moment crystallized our family's brokenness and the long road to healing ahead of us. Mrs. Anderson chose that moment to arrive with the choir members for their daily visit. The scene they encountered, my father crying, Emily torn, Mom praying silently in the corner, became the catalyst for something remarkable. Without prompting, they began to sing Amazing Grace, the same hymn that had been interrupted by my collapse. The music filled the room with a healing presence that felt like an echo of the divine love I had experienced. One by one, other patients and visitors gathered at the doorway, drawn by the harmonies. Even the nurses stopped their rounds to listen. "That's what I felt there," I said into the silence that followed. "That kind of love, that kind of harmony. We're all meant to create that here on earth, starting with our own families." My father looked up, his face transformed by grief and hope. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he whispered. "None of us do," Mom responded, moving to stand beside my bed. "That's what makes it grace." In that moment, surrounded by song and family, both blood and chosen, I understood more clearly the mission I had been given. Our broken family wasn't just a source of pain, it was a testimony waiting to be shared, a demonstration of how divine love could transform even the deepest wounds into channels of grace. The transformation within St. Michael's community began quietly at first, like ripples spreading from a stone dropped in still water. Father Michael invited me to share my experience during Sunday Mass, my voice trembling at first, but growing stronger as I described the overwhelming love I had encountered on the other side. It wasn't like the heaven we read about in books, I explained, to the packed cathedral. There were no pearly gates or streets of gold. It was more like being immersed in pure love, understanding, and forgiveness. Every question I ever had about why things happened, my heart condition, my father leaving, Emily's bullying, suddenly made perfect sense in that light. Emily sat in the front row beside Mom, her usual pride replaced by humility as I shared how even her cruelty had served a divine purpose. Behind them, James, our father, listened with bowed head, his presence both a source of tension and a testament to the power of redemption. The Bible study group, which I had rarely attended due to my health, became a weekly gathering that overflowed the church basement. People came not just from our parish, but from all over town, drawn by the story of two sisters reunited through a miracle. Emily and I sat side by side, finding new meaning in familiar verses. "Perfect love drives out fear," Father Michael would quote, his eyes twinkling as he watched us. 1 John 4:18. Sometimes we need to experience that perfect love to understand how to share it with others. The words resonated deeply with both of us, remembering how fear had driven our father's abandonment and Emily's subsequent behavior. My near-death experience began to influence the choir in unexpected ways. Mrs. Anderson, inspired by my descriptions of heavenly harmonies, composed a new piece titled Beyond the Veil. The music attempted to capture what I had heard in that other realm, layers of harmony that seemed to transcend earthly limitations. During rehearsals, even Emily, who had never shown interest in singing before, joined the choir. "I want to understand," she confided one day after practice. "When you sing, I see glimpses of what you experienced. It's like the music breaks down the walls I built around my heart." Her vulnerability in these moments continued to amaze me, proving that the greatest miracles weren't just about physical healing. The school itself underwent a subtle but profound change. Sister Margaret incorporated elements of my experience into her religion classes, using it to discuss deeper concepts of divine love and forgiveness. Students who had once participated in Emily's campaign of bullying now approached me with tearful apologies, inspired by the example of reconciliation between sisters. Katie Martinez, my faithful friend from before, helped me start a support group for students dealing with family fractures. Emily's presence at these meetings was particularly powerful, as she shared her perspective on how privilege and pain had twisted her understanding of love. One particularly meaningful moment came when our father attended a school assembly where Emily and I were scheduled to sing Beyond the Veil. It was his first public acknowledgement of both his daughters, and the tension in the auditorium was palpable. As our voices joined in harmony, I saw tears streaming down his face, tears of regret, yes, but also of hope and healing. The local media caught wind of our story, but Father Michael helped us maintain its spiritual integrity, ensuring it didn't become a mere sensational headline. "This isn't about proving near-death experiences," he would tell reporters. "It's about demonstrating how divine love can heal generations of hurt." Through it all, my health remained fragile, but each physical challenge now carried a deeper meaning. The doctors continued to monitor my heart closely, amazed by my recovery but unable to explain it in medical terms. I knew the truth that my healing, while miraculous, was secondary to the spiritual awakening it had catalyzed in our community. Mom watched these developments with quiet joy, her own faith deepening as she witnessed the fruits of her years of prayer. "God writes straight with crooked lines," she often said, quoting an old Portuguese proverb. All those years of pain were just part of His perfect plan. As spring turned to summer, our story of reconciliation and renewal continued to unfold in unexpected ways. The mistakes and wounds of the past were not erased, but transformed into stepping stones toward understanding and grace. In my weakened heart, I carried the certainty that this was exactly what I had been sent back to accomplish, not just to heal, but to help others find their way to love through the darkness of their own pain. The breaking point came on a stormy evening in late June, during what was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner at our house. Mom had invited James and Emily over, hoping to build on the fragile progress we'd made. The tension in our small dining room was palpable, thick as the humidity before the thunderstorm raging outside. "I want to restore my rights," James announced suddenly, setting down his fork with a clang that made us all jump. "I want to be part of Sarah's life legally, not just these supervised visits." His words hung in the air like smoke, choking us all with their implications. Mom's face went pale. "After 13 years, now you want rights?" Her voice trembled with barely controlled emotion. "When she was dying in hospitals, where were your rights then? When I was working 3 jobs to pay for her medications, where were these parental concerns?" Emily, who had been pushing food around her plate, looked up sharply. "Dad, you told me Sarah's mom kept you away. You said she refused your help." The betrayal in her voice cut through the room like a knife. "Was that a lie, too?" James shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his expensive suit suddenly seeming like armor that was cracking. "Emily, sweetheart, it was complicated. I was young, scared." Stopped, my voice surprised even me with its strength. "No more complications, no more excuses. If you want rights, you need to face the whole truth. All of it, right here, right now." The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating our faces in harsh bursts. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest but pushed through it. This confrontation had been building since my return from death's threshold, and nothing, not even my weak heart, would stop it now. "You want the truth?" James stood up, his facade finally cracking. "I was a coward. When the doctors said Sarah might not live past infancy, I couldn't handle it. I ran. I met Emily's mother, and she was everything Grace wasn't uncomplicated. From a good family, pregnant with a healthy baby." Emily flinched as if she'd been struck. "So I was just convenient? A replacement for the sick daughter you abandoned?" "No, I loved you from the moment you were born," James protested. "But I pushed you so hard to be perfect because I was trying to justify my choice. Every time you succeeded, it proved I'd made the right decision. Every time you excelled, it eased my guilt about Sarah." The truth poured out like a flood, how he'd watched us from afar all these years, how he'd driven past the hospital during my long stays, how he'd never stopped feeling guilty but had buried it under layers of success and new family happiness. "I saw you once," Mom revealed quietly. "In the hospital parking lot when Sarah was 7. She was having open heart surgery, and I saw you sitting in your car. I waited for hours, hoping you'd come in. But you drove away." Lightning flashed again, and in that moment I saw my father, clearly not the successful businessman in his expensive suit, but a broken man who'd spent 13 years running from his own shame. "In heaven," I said softly, drawing everyone's attention, "I saw all of this. I saw your pain, Dad. I saw how your choice haunted you, how it twisted Emily's childhood, how it shaped all our lives. But I also saw something else. I saw forgiveness." Emily moved to stand beside me, our hands finding each other instinctively. "We're not your redemption story, Dad," she said firmly. "Sarah and I have found our way to being sisters despite you, not because of you. If you want rights, you need to earn them not through lawyers or guilt, but through real change." The storm outside began to ease, as if nature itself was listening to our family's watershed moment. James sank back into his chair, tears flowing freely now. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he whispered. "No one does," Mom replied, echoing our conversation from the hospital. "That's why it's a gift. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the past didn't happen. It means choosing to love anyway." In that moment, something shifted in our family dynamic. The truth, in all its ugly beauty, had finally been spoken aloud. We were no longer playing roles: the abandoned daughter, the perfect replacement, the sacrificial mother, the guilty father. We were just broken people, reaching across years of pain toward healing. "So what now?" James asked, looking lost and small for the first time in my memory. "Now," I said, feeling the presence of divine love that had guided me back to life, "we start over. Not from scratch, but from truth. And this time we all choose to stay and face whatever comes together." The peace that followed our family confrontation lasted exactly 3 weeks before my heart decided to remind us all of its fragility. It happened during choir practice as Emily and I were rehearsing our duet for the upcoming church fundraiser. One moment I was singing, reaching for a high note in Amazing Grace, and the next, the world tilted sideways. Sarah Emily's scream echoed through the cathedral as I collapsed. The speed with which she caught me, preventing my head from hitting the wooden pew, showed how constantly she watched for signs of my weakness now. Her designer clothes wrinkled as she cradled me, no longer caring about appearances. Mrs. Anderson was already calling 911, her usual calm replaced by urgent fear. The other choir members gathered around, their faces blurring as my vision darkened. Through the growing haze, I heard Emily praying not the polished prayers of our Catholic upbringing, but raw, desperate pleas. "Please, God, not again. Not when we've just become a family. Not when things are finally right. Take anything else, but don't take my sister." The ambulance arrived in a blur of sirens and urgent voices. This time was different from my previous attacks. The pain was sharper, the struggle for breath more intense. The paramedics exchanged worried glances as they loaded me into the ambulance. Emily refused to leave my side, her hand gripping mine as she rattled off my medical history with frightening precision. Mom met us at the hospital, her face aged 10 years in an hour. Behind her came James, our father, looking lost in the fluorescent hospital lights. The same halls where he had once hidden in shame now became his path to redemption as he used his influence to demand the best doctors, the most advanced treatments. Her heart is failing, Dr. Roberts explained in the family conference room. The previous damage combined with the strain of her recent experiences has weakened it beyond its capacity to recover naturally. His eyes held a mix of professional distance and genuine concern. We need to consider a transplant, but given her complex medical history. The word hung unspoken in the air, unlikely. I was too high risk, too complicated, the waiting lists were long, and time was something I suddenly had very little of. Emily refused to accept this verdict. She stormed out of the conference room, phone in hand, already calling every connection she had through our father's social circle. James followed her, his own phone out, ready to spend every penny of his fortune if it would save me. Mom sat by my bed that night, her rosary moving steadily through her fingers as she prayed. The monitors beeped a steady reminder of my mortality, each sound a countdown we couldn't see. Father Michael arrived with communion, his presence bringing a peace that even morphine couldn't provide. "I'm not afraid," I whispered to him during confession. "I've seen what's waiting. But I'm not ready. There's so much unfinished here." The news spread through St. Michael's School like wildfire. Students who had once avoided me now crowded the hospital chapel, keeping vigil. Katie Martinez organized a prayer chain that ran 24 hours a day. Even the teachers took shifts, ensuring that someone was always praying for me. But it was Emily's transformation that touched everyone the most. The girl who had once terrorized me now became my fiercest advocate. She moved into my hospital room, sleeping on a cot beside my bed, monitoring every medication, questioning every doctor's decision. "I just found you," she would whisper when she thought I was sleeping. "I'm not losing you now. God can't be that cruel." The community rallied in ways we never expected. A fundraiser organized by Mrs. Anderson raised enough money to cover experimental treatments. Local businesses donated services to help Mom keep our household running. James matched every donation dollar for dollar, his wealth finally serving a purpose beyond status. As my strength ebbed, I found myself thinking about the divine love I had experienced during my near-death experience. The peace was still there, waiting, but so was a deep conviction that my work here wasn't finished. Our family's healing had only just begun, and somehow I knew God's plan extended beyond these hospital walls. "Hold on, sweetheart," Mom would say, her faith never wavering. God didn't bring us all together just to tear us apart. And so I held on, watching as my illness accomplished what years of living couldn't. It united our broken family, healed old wounds, and showed us all what really mattered. The question was, would I live long enough to see these changes bear fruit, or was my purpose simply to plant the seeds? The doctors delivered the final verdict on a quiet Sunday morning, their voices hushed against the backdrop of distant church bells. My heart was failing rapidly, and without a miracle transplant within the next few weeks, there was nothing more they could do. The words fell like stones in the sterile hospital room, each prognosis heavier than the last. "We've exhausted all conventional treatments," Dr. Roberts explained, his professional demeanor cracking slightly as he looked at my family gathered around my bed. "The damage is too extensive and her body is too weak for most experimental options." Emily, who had been my constant guardian for weeks, stood up so abruptly her chair clattered to the floor. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "There has to be something else. Dad can pay for anything, fly in specialists from anywhere. We can't just give up." James placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, but his own face betrayed his devastation. All his wealth, all his connections, all his desperate attempts at redemption couldn't buy what I needed most: a healthy heart and more time. Mom sat silently by my bed, her rosary wrapped so tightly around her fingers it left marks. She hadn't slept properly in days, surviving on coffee and prayer. The sight of her trying to be strong, to hold everything together, hurt more than my failing heart. How her voice cracked and she had to start again. "How long does she have?" Dr. Roberts shifted uncomfortably. "Without a transplant? 2 weeks, maybe 3. We can make her comfortable, manage the pain." The word comfortable sparked something in Emily. She whirled on the doctor, all her old fire returning. Comfortable? You want to make her comfortable while she dies? She's 13, she's my sister, she can't just... Her voice broke as tears finally overwhelmed her. I watched this scene unfold with a strange sense of detachment. The pain medication made everything feel slightly unreal, like watching a movie about someone else's life. But the emotions in the room were raw and real. Emily's desperate anger, James's helpless grief, Mom's quiet agony. Father Michael arrived later that afternoon, bringing not just communion but news that shook us all. The entire school is planning a prayer vigil, he said. Not just our students, other schools are joining in. The cathedral will be open day and night. But even as he spoke of hope and faith, I could see the worry in his eyes. He had performed too many last rites, consoled too many grieving families to not recognize the signs. The medical staff's gentle efficiency, the increasing doses of pain medication, the way they spoke in soft, careful tones, everything pointed to the same conclusion. That night, when they thought I was sleeping, I heard Mom break down for the first time since my diagnosis. Her sobs were muffled against James's shoulder, an intimacy born of shared grief rather than love. "I can't lose her," she whispered. "Not after everything. Not when we're finally a family again. Please God, not now." Emily, who had been pretending to sleep on her cot, got up and joined them. The three of them huddled together in the dim light of my hospital room, the father who had abandoned us, the sister who had tormented me, and the mother who had sacrificed everything for me. All their past conflicts and hurts seemed insignificant now, swept away by the tide of impending loss. I wanted to comfort them, to tell them about the peace I had experienced during my near-death experience, to assure them that whatever happened, love transcended even death. But my body was too weak, my voice too faint. All I could do was watch as my illness accomplished what years of effort couldn't have brought my broken family together in a circle of love and shared pain. The monitors beeped steadily, counting down moments I might not have many more of. Outside my window, the lights of the city twinkled like earthbound stars, while somewhere in the distance the cathedral bells tolled the hour, a reminder that time, precious and fleeting, was slipping away. As my body weakened, my spirit seemed to grow stronger. Each breath was a struggle now, but each moment became more precious, more vivid. I began writing letters to Mom, to Emily, to James, to everyone who had been part of my journey. My handwriting was shaky, but the words flowed from my heart with crystal clarity. To Mom, I wrote of her endless love and sacrifice. "You never let me feel limited by my heart condition. You taught me that real strength isn't in the muscle that beats in our chest, but in the love we choose to give. Every extra shift you worked. Every night you spent holding my hand in hospital rooms, they were all prayers of love made visible." For Emily, my words spilled out like a river. "Sister, don't carry guilt for our past. Those years of bullying shaped both of us into who we needed to become. Your cruelty taught me forgiveness. Your transformation showed me miracles are real. Promise me you'll keep singing in the choir. Your voice carries healing others need to hear." To James, my father, I offered the forgiveness he still struggled to accept. "Your absence taught me that love can survive even the deepest wounds. Your return showed me it's never too late to choose love over fear. Take care of them when I'm gone, not with money or things, but with presence. That's all any of us ever really wanted from you." Mrs. Anderson helped me plan one final performance with the choir. Even though I could barely sit up now, I insisted on being part of it. The hospital staff arranged for me to be wheeled into the chapel, oxygen tank and all. The sight of my choir robe draped over my hospital gown brought tears to everyone's eyes. Music, I told them during rehearsal, my voice barely a whisper, is how the angels taught me to pray. When we sing together, heaven and earth touch just for a moment. Promise me you'll keep that connection alive. Katie Martinez spent hours by my bedside recording my memories and messages. "Someone needs to tell our story," I insisted. "Not just the miracle parts, but the messy human parts too. People need to know that love is stronger than death, that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds." Father Michael brought communion daily now, and during these quiet moments I shared with him the peace I felt. "I'm not afraid anymore," I confided. "The first time I died, I saw what awaits us. It's more beautiful than any words can describe, but I worry about those I'm leaving behind." He smiled gently, holding my hand. "Perhaps that's why God let you come back the first time, to prepare them for this moment. Your family has learned more about love through this journey than most people learn in a lifetime. My room became a sacred space filled with prayers, tears, and surprisingly laughter. Emily would climb into my bed, careful of the tubes and wires, and we'd share secrets like normal sisters. Mom and James learned to be in the same room without tension, united in their love for their daughters. One evening, as the sunset painted my room in golden light, I gathered my family close. "I need you to promise me something," I whispered. "Promise me you'll stay a family after I'm gone. Promise me you'll remember that love is stronger than any hurt, any mistake, any loss." Emily clutched my hand, tears streaming down her face. "How can we be a family without you? You're the one who brought us together." "No," I smiled, using what little strength I had to squeeze her hand. "Love brought us together. I was just its messenger. And love will keep you together if you let it." As my body grew weaker, my spirit seemed to glow brighter. The nurses commented on the peace that filled my room, even in the darkest hours of night. Visitors would enter crying and leave smiling, touched by something they couldn't quite explain. I spent my remaining time teaching them how to live without me, showing Mom how to lean on others for support, helping Emily channel her strength into compassion, guiding James toward authentic fatherhood rather than mere provision. Remember, I told them, every time you hear the choir sing, every time you see a sunrise, every time you choose love over fear, I'll be there. Death can't break the bonds love creates. It just transforms them into something even more beautiful. The miracle happened on the morning of my planned final choir performance. I had grown so weak that the doctors initially refused to let me participate, but something extraordinary occurred as the first rays of dawn broke through my hospital window. Sister Margaret burst into my room, her face flushed with excitement and tears streaming down her cheeks. A heart, she gasped, barely able to get the words out. They found a matching heart. "Dr. Roberts is on his way." The news spread through the hospital like wildfire. Emily, who had been sleeping on her usual cot, jumped up so quickly she knocked over her IV stand. Mom, who had stepped out for her morning prayer in the chapel, came running back, rosary still clutched in her trembling hands. Dr. Roberts arrived moments later, confirming what seemed impossible. A perfect match, he explained, his professional demeanor barely containing his excitement. Young donor, ideal size, perfect blood type compatibility. The odds of finding such a match, especially given Sarah's complex condition, it's nothing short of miraculous. James immediately offered his private helicopter to transport the donor heart, while the hospital erupted into a flurry of pre-surgery preparations. But it was Father Michael's quiet observation that brought everything into perspective. "Today is the feast of St. Jude," he said softly, "the patron saint of impossible causes, and the donor heart is coming from St. Jude's Children's Hospital." The timing seemed beyond coincidence. Just hours before what was supposed to be my final performance, a heart became available that matched all the complex criteria needed for my unique case. Even the most skeptical medical staff couldn't help but whisper about divine intervention. As they prepared me for surgery, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, similar to what I had experienced during my near-death experience. The same divine presence seemed to fill the room, wrapping us all in a love that transcended understanding. Mom and Emily stood at my bedside as the transport team arrived with the cooling unit containing my new heart. Through my tears, I could see Emily's lips moving in prayer, her hand clasped tightly with our Father's. Mom's rosary beads clicked softly, a familiar sound that had accompanied every major moment of my life. "Remember what I told you about love being stronger than death," I whispered to them as the nurses prepared to take me to surgery. "Sometimes it's strong enough to bring new life too." The last thing I saw before the anesthesia took hold was my family, Mom, Emily, and James, standing together, united in love and hope. The impossible was becoming possible, and we were all about to witness a miracle that would transform not just my life, but the lives of everyone in our community. The hours of my surgery transformed St. Michael's Cathedral into a sanctuary of hope. The entire school gathered there, joined by students from neighboring schools, all holding candles and singing hymns that echoed through the ancient stone walls. Emily led the choir in continuous song, her voice carrying the prayers of hundreds. News of the miracle spread rapidly through our small town. The local newspaper reporter who arrived to cover what was supposed to be a tragic story of my final performance instead found herself documenting something extraordinary. People who had never set foot in a church stood shoulder to shoulder with lifelong parishioners, all united in prayer for my recovery. Katie Martinez organized the students into shifts, ensuring the vigil continued without break. Even my former bullies, the ones who had once followed Emily's lead in tormenting me, now knelt in genuine prayer. The transformation in their hearts reflected the larger change taking place in our community. Mrs. Anderson, overcome with emotion, composed a new hymn right there in the cathedral, Heart of Love, she called it, and taught it to the gathered crowd. The melody carried notes of both sorrow and joy, reflecting our journey from despair to hope. When Dr. Roberts finally emerged from surgery, exhausted but smiling, the news spread through the gathered crowd like a wave. The surgery was successful, he announced to the waiting community. Her new heart is strong and beating perfectly. The cathedral erupted in celebration, but it was more than just joy over my survival. Something fundamental had shifted in our community. Old rivalries dissolved, past hurts were forgiven, and new bonds were formed in those hours of shared prayer and hope. Emily, who had once ruled the school through fear and intimidation, now used her influence to create a support group for students facing family challenges. My sister taught me that our wounds can become our gifts, she told the school paper. Sometimes the things that hurt us most can help us help others. The transformation extended beyond the school walls. Local businesses that had helped during my illness continued their support for other families in crisis. The prayer chain that had formed during my surgery became a permanent ministry at St. Michael's, offering round-the-clock spiritual support to anyone in need. James, our father, established a foundation to help families with children facing serious medical conditions, but more importantly, he became a regular presence at school events and church services, no longer hiding from his past but using it to help others facing similar struggles. As I recovered in the hospital, visitors brought stories of how my journey had affected their lives. Parents and children who had been estranged began speaking again. People who had carried years of resentment found the strength to forgive. The miracle of my new heart seemed to inspire spiritual heart transplants throughout our community. 1 year after my heart transplant, St. Michael's Cathedral was once again filled to capacity, but this time for a celebration. The anniversary Mass brought together everyone who had been part of my journey, from the medical team that saved my life to the hundreds of community members who had prayed for my recovery. Emily and I stood side by side in the choir loft, our voices blending perfectly as we sang Heart of Love, the hymn that had been composed during my surgery. Mom sat in the front pew, holding hands with James, their past bitterness transformed into a gentle friendship built on shared gratitude and understanding. The changes in our family were profound. Emily had become not just my sister but my closest friend, her former cruelty replaced by fierce protectiveness and genuine love. She used her natural leadership abilities to create positive change, establishing a peer support program for students dealing with family challenges. James had kept his promise to be present in our lives, not just financially but emotionally. He attended every choir performance, school event, and family dinner, slowly earning back the trust he had squandered. His relationship with Emily had deepened too, as they both learned that true love wasn't about perfection but acceptance. Mom flourished in unexpected ways. With James now helping with medical expenses, she was able to reduce her workload and pursue her own dreams. She started teaching at St. Michael's School, sharing her story of faith and perseverance with other parents facing similar struggles. The cathedral itself had been transformed. What was once just a beautiful building had become a true sanctuary of healing. The prayer ministry that formed during my surgery continued to grow, offering support to anyone in need. The choir, under Mrs. Anderson's direction, became known throughout the diocese for its ability to touch hearts and heal spirits. Katie Martinez, still my faithful friend, documented our story for the school newspaper, which was eventually picked up by national Catholic publications, The Miracle. She wrote, "Wasn't just the heart transplant. It was the way one girl's journey transformed an entire community's understanding of love and forgiveness." Dr. Roberts became a regular visitor to our home, no longer just my physician but a family friend. He often said that my case had changed his approach to medicine, teaching him that healing involved not just the body but the spirit as well. Father Michael used our story in his homilies, but always with a gentle reminder that miracles weren't just dramatic events like heart transplants. The real miracle, he would say, is the daily choice to love, to forgive, to begin again. As I stood in the choir loft that anniversary morning, looking out over the gathered congregation, I saw countless small miracles. Former enemies sitting together, broken families rebuilding bridges, wounded hearts finding healing. The divine love I had experienced during my near-death experience was now visible in the everyday lives of our community. People often ask me if I remember what heaven was like, if I miss that perfect peace I experienced during my near-death experience. The truth is, I see glimpses of it every day in my sister's smile, in my mother's strength, in my father's redemption, and in our community's transformation. After that Sunday anniversary Mass, our family gathered at home for dinner, a weekly tradition that now included not just Mom, Emily, and James, but also Father Michael, Mrs. Anderson, Katie, and others who had become part of our extended family. As I watched them share stories and laughter around our crowded table, I understood something profound about God's plan. The purpose of my journey wasn't just about getting a new heart, I told them during dinner. It was about showing how divine love can heal even the deepest wounds. Every person in this room has been part of that miracle. Emily, who now wore a small heart pendant matching mine, reached for my hand under the table. "You taught us that real love isn't about being perfect," she said. "It's about being present, even when it's messy and difficult." Through the window, we could see the spire of St. Michael's Cathedral catching the last rays of sunset. The bells began to toll, calling people to evening prayer, the same bells that had rung during my collapse, my surgery, and now this celebration of life. James stood up, something he rarely did during these gatherings. "Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you didn't just get a new heart that day. You gave all of us new hearts capable of forgiveness, understanding, and unconditional love." Mom wiped away tears as she added, "And that's the real miracle. Not just that you survived, but that your journey showed us all how to truly live." Father Michael nodded, saying what he had told me privately many times: sometimes God's greatest gifts come wrapped in our deepest wounds. Sarah's story reminds us that love is stronger than death, stronger than fear, stronger than our own mistakes. As I looked around at these faces, each marked by their own journey of transformation, I realized that heaven isn't just a place we go after death. It's something we can create here on earth. Every time we choose love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, unity over division. The divine love I experienced during my near-death experience wasn't meant to remain a private memory. It was meant to be shared, to ripple outward, touching life after life with its healing power. Through our broken family's story, others found hope for their own healing. Remember, I told them all, every heartbeat is a gift, every breath a chance to love, every moment an opportunity to create heaven on earth. That's the message I was sent back to share. As the evening light faded and the cathedral bells fell silent, we joined hands around the table to pray, Catholic and Protestant, believer and skeptic, family by blood and family by choice. In that moment, I felt again the perfect peace I had known in heaven, but now it was here on earth, alive in the hearts of those who had learned to love beyond their wounds. That's the final miracle, not just that I lived, but that we all learned how to truly live with hearts open to love's endless possibilities. Thank you for experiencing Sarah's powerful journey with us. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. What moments resonated most with you? Have you experienced similar transformations in your own life? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support our team and stay updated with more inspiring stories of faith, love, and healing. Every subscription helps us continue sharing these meaningful narratives with others who might need them. Please share this video with friends and family who might find hope in Sarah's story. Your simple act of hitting the like button and spreading this message could be the light someone needs today. Together, we can create a community of healing and understanding.